Hi students, let's talk about some more sociology. So this is week 6 and we are in the middle of the social structure discussion. This is found in chapter 4, and this week we're going to look at the micro scale side of social structure. So sometime last week in your notes you wrote about what the components are of social structure. The macro scale components include social institutions, and then kind of half of statuses and roles, the norms side of statuses and roles that come from the social institutions that are in your society. And then those statuses and roles are lived out on the micro scale by the third component of social structure, which is social groups. And so that's where we're starting today. So social groups, like it says, is the micro side of social structure, but please remember what I just said, and perhaps write it down if you don't already have it in your notes, that social structure ranges from macro scale to micro scale. And if you remember that gorgeous picture that I drew on the board when we were talking about it, I had the concentric circles that were intertwined and linked, because the macro scale is connected to the micro scale, because the norms, the patterns like social facts that exist because our social institutions are shaped the way our social institutions are shaped, we have the statuses and roles in society established by those social institutions, and then those statuses and roles are played out. And I'm going to focus on that word played out in a subsequent lecture this week when we look at the presentation of ourselves in everyday life and how we, perhaps according to some micro-scale sociologists, we sometimes live our daily life experiences from situation to situation that we find ourselves in on a daily basis. We sometimes live that as though we are actors in some sort of screenplay. So we will be looking at that later on this week. But for now, let's finish up our discussion about that micro side of social structure, social groups. Now, this list of characteristics, so to speak, I don't have a pretty sentence written up here like I usually don't. If I ask you to write me a pretty sentence, however, I'm going to need these concepts to be communicated in your correct sentence about what is a social group. Okay, so you can't just throw random people together who happen to be shopping at the shopping mall on a particular day. They happen to be in Lowe's hardware store on a particular day and call them a social group. Sociologists need more than that, and there is more to the third component of social structure than just saying a collection of people who happen to be at the same place at the same time. The characteristics of a social group must include that the people have a social identity that is linked together. So I have two or more. You have to have two or more people for a social group, and those people don't have to be in the same room with each other to be able to have their social identity linked. You might be on a multiplayer game, and you and another player who you maybe have never met face to face, but you have a connection with, a bond that has been established through the months and years that you've played this game, that you always log in at the same time on the same server in the same world and act as a team. So these social groups can be face-to-face, but also can be, across the planet because of global communication patterns. But the two people aren't just two people who happen to get on an elevator to go to floor 5. They are linked together somehow in their social identity. You are friends, you are spouses, you are classmates, you are something that links you together on a regular basis. And because of that link, you have predictable or frequent or regular social interaction with each other. Now, when I wrote the word predictable up here, I was toying with what other word to put up here. And some of the other words that I erased when I wrote up here, I just used in that sentence. Frequent social interaction, regular social interaction. The predictable word, I arrived at that because if you only communicate with somebody once a week, but you do communicate with them, or at least they communicate with you. Like, for instance, if you go to church once a week, or if you watch a TV show once a week, or something like that, that is predictable periodic, regular social interaction that you're having. Whether you can communicate with those TV characters or not, whether you stand up and react to something that your preacher says or not, you are getting a communication process, and therefore, if you see that person on a regular basis, you have a social identity associated with that person. For instance, we use personal pronouns. I talk about my husband, that is different from your husband. Those are like possession words, right? Or even my minister, that's different from your preacher or something, right? So these are social identity markers because we claim them for our own. My child, your child. So these are social identity or identifiers, these words, that link us to the other individuals that we're talking about, and therefore also we have predictable social interaction with those individuals because of that link, okay? And that social interaction sometimes might be very businesslike, like maybe the only reason that you have social interaction with some of your colleagues at work, for instance, is because of a monthly meeting where you all get together and have to brief each other. So maybe the business of your relationship is what links you together. We are colleagues. You are my colleague, I am yours. And so we have periodic social interaction, and the bond that links us together is the business that we are working toward. So every social group has social identity. The members have social identity linked to each other. And let's go back and review. If you want to, zoom back in my video really quick and look at the kinds of words I was using. Husband, wife, spouse, friend, colleague. These are statuses. These are statuses with roles that go along with them. And so there is a link, a direct link, from the social groups that you and I are a part of to the statuses and roles that we act out every day on a daily basis. And those statuses and roles get their norms, the behaviors associated with them. It gets that from the norms of society on the macro scale. So social groups is part of social structure because of that. We live out that macro scale patterns in our daily life through the statuses and roles that we get through our membership in these social groups. Okay? So, yeah, okay, good. So I hadn't pointed to this thing on the bottom of the board yet, but that's what I just said, right? So I didn't have space to fill in more information, but the bonds that bring people together and keep them together in their social groups, that social identity, come from the norms that exist on the macro scale. From the social institutions that create the statuses and the role expectation that goes with those statuses. And then how do we live that out in our daily life? Well, our social group membership, which all of us have multiple social groups, and we will look in another video, we will look at the different types of social groups. If you've already looked at kind of a graphic that's included in chapter 4, you'll see that social structure or society, I think is what they have at the top, has social institutions, statuses and roles, and social groups in it. And it's going to give you some examples of different types of social groups. And so in future videos this week, we're going to look at that. But let me just look really quick and make sure that you've got everything from me that you need for this introductory video about social groups. Yes, this is the microscale side. All of us have group memberships, but that doesn't mean we are always with members of our group. Because if we stop at a gas station and we're gassing up, and somebody says hello to us across the side of the pump just to be friendly, that's not a social group, because you're not going to have any sort of predictability that you will ever see that person again. And there's no bond that's going to bring you back together necessarily at that same gas station at the same time or whatever. It's not, a bond where you intentionally go to see that particular person. So the ties that bind us together come from the norms that are established in our society, the pattern of social facts, the pattern of social norms, the values, the social expectations that we learn in our socialization process. All of these things are vitally important for a social structure in general. There's not just a macro scale side, there is a micro side, because sociology is the systematic study of society, yes, but human interaction, yes, also. And that's the you and me level, the micro side, that's always connected to macro. So we will investigate this further in another video in just a second. Thank you.